my years of research, of interviewing literally hundreds of people, because I don't think the ETs are here to hurt us. There's a lot of fear and misinformation surrounding the subject, and it's really not warranted. It's because they've been around forever. They're not here to take over our planet or intentionally scare people or hurt them or anything like that. This is my assessment. Don't believe me? Look at the first-hand accounts, and I think that bears it out.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master San Qing, and I have one of my favorite categories, which is exploring all other dimensions other than one that you believe you're working in, which is your reality. I would like to welcome to the podcast today Preston Dennett. He's an author, a researcher of all things UFOs. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes. This is becoming, you've held the torch here for quite some time through your exploration in your lifetime, which gives you this mastery and insight with all the things that you've gathered over your journey. I must say that lately, over my 30 years in this sort of like what some people would call altered reality, being beyond this 3D, I've never seen as many aliens in people's auric fields and things representing these types of things ever. In the last 6 months, I've been seeing a huge amount. So I would love you to start the podcast with just sharing a little bit about yourself and how you got to this very moment.
Yeah, sure. I would never in a million years have thought this would be something I was doing, because I was honestly really skeptical of anything involving UFOs or the paranormal, ghosts, life after death, all of it. I didn't believe. I would describe myself as a materialist. I'm come from a pretty large family, 6 kids. I'm number 5. It turned out that my older brother, Mark, did have a UFO sighting. I remember I was 13 years old, or 14 around there. He came running into the house and said, "I saw this thing." And I'm like, "Mark, just go away. UFOs aren't real. What are you talking about?" And it started to sort of circle around me, because as a very young boy, I did have this weird psychic event where I knew all the answers to a game show, but I had not heard of psychic abilities. So I didn't know how to interpret it. I just thought it was the funniest thing. But my sister Victoria was there, and yeah, I knew all the answers to, I think the show was called Treasure Hunt. And it was just a weird thing and out of place, and I didn't think too much of it. And I was always somewhat intuitive and very philosophical, I guess. I was a thinker, no doubt. I loved science. But everything changed for me when I was 21 years old. I remember the exact date. It was November 17, 1986. I was watching the news, and a little report came on describing a sighting of a UFO over Alaska by a pilot. I thought, well, this pilot is crazy. He's seeing a reflection off the ice cap. I made up every ridiculous explanation I could find to just explain it away. But it interested me. And I remembered my brother Mark said he'd seen a UFO. So don't know why, but I went up to him and I asked him to describe it to me again. And he kind of looked at me like, "Are you sure you want to hear this?" I'm like, yeah, tell me. And he described this amazing sighting. I mean, he was with his 2 friends driving down Reseda Boulevard. This is right outside of LA one evening, late 1970s, and saw what they thought for a second was a helicopter, but immediately discarded it because it was silent. It had no propellers. It was very close. It was at treetop level. It's your classic flying saucer. Little lights around it with a dome on top. And they chased it in their car down Reseda Boulevard for about 15 minutes. Other cars were chasing it too. So Marco was telling me this. I'm like, well, gosh, he's not lying. I know that. He's my brother. Don't think he's misperceiving. He's clearly not hallucinating. He's like, listen, I have, talk to Phil and Greg. Those were his friends. If you don't believe me, they'll verify my story. So I did. And of course they did. And that's what set the ball rolling for me. And it was a huge shock when I found out that my sister-in-law had seen UFOs and gray extraterrestrials. I mean, full-on encounter, face-to-face. My other sister-in-law had an encounter with little blue beings. I had a couple of friends who had very close-up sightings. One had missing time. I brought it up at work, stupid me. And the lady I worked with for years described how she and her whole family saw this star-like object darting around. They started seeing a lot more UFOs after that sighting. And then her daughter had an encounter with grays and was taken on board. And she's describing this. And in walks Dorothy, who, if you ever meet Dorothy, you would love her. She's unfiltered. She's very funny, really smart. And she's like, oh, UFOs? One followed me home from the library. Me, my mom, and my sister. And it's weird. We left at 9 o'clock. We didn't get home till 10:15. And it only takes us 5 minutes. So I don't know what happened to the time. I'm like, oh my gosh, Dorothy, you were probably taken on board. Because by this point, I'm buying books on this subject, trying to disprove it and not able to. So I dove into the deep end. I bought every book I could find. I subscribed to every UFO group. And there was a few of them. Every journal. I started going to conventions, attending the MUFON monthly meetings, Mutual UFO Network, and pretty soon became a field investigator for them, investigating my own cases, interviewing people formally, trying to see a UFO myself because I wanted to see one, and I eventually did. But yeah, it just kind of kept snowballing. I was writing articles pretty soon. Next thing I knew, I was going on the radio and speaking at conventions. And for about 10 years, I just dived into research and writing articles. I wrote about 30 articles before I put out my first book, which was UFO Healings, people who've been healed as a result of a UFO encounter, and have not looked back. I mean, I started putting out, on the average, about a book per year. That was 1996. So I've got about over 30 books right now. Yeah, I'm obsessed. I'm not ashamed to say it.
Wow. There's so much going on right now. Even today, I say I'm out of Nevada, Las Vegas. Isn't there a potential sighting that has gone across the news recently? I didn't delve deeper into it. Are you familiar with that?
In Las Vegas?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a report last year of a family who said that they had seen a UFO and a very tall ET in their backyard. And it was a very controversial case. As far as I know, it was never officially investigated.
Right.
There's a lot of accusations of hoaxing. So I'm skeptical. It's weird. I came into this as a skeptic, but finding out it's all real in a weird, ironic way made me more skeptical because I'd been lied to. Because our government, I found out, was covering this information up. And so I'm skeptical of that particular case because as far as I know, it's never been investigated. And I really would love to know what happened. But I always, reserve judgment until I can get more information about it. Because a lot of people apparently did see what they believe is a meteor. And so this may have been conflating different things. But I do know the family did, or at least one of the witnesses did a little video saying, no, I saw this, and then disappeared. The whole thing just disappeared out of the news. So I really don't know what to think of that case.
Yeah, I mean, it just recently came back up on the local news here, and I didn't even hear about it the first time around. And so I was like, okay, for some reason I'm a little, I kind of have a reservation, not a reservation, but if I actually tune in, if for some reason my teachers, my guides tune me into the news, which I don't watch at all, it's for a reason. So they said, oh, take a look at this. Oh, this seems a little obscurely too close to home. So now you ask yourself, well, okay, from me in my intuitive clear senses and skills of psychic mediumship training people for over 30 years in this. Is this kid telling the truth? Yes. Now the question is it a simulated situation? I'm getting an interesting filter of that coming from three different directions of what the actual, tangible, real interaction is, and what has been simulated to present itself that way, and then what he actually saw and then processed as his reality. So there's a few filters there, but from his sober reality, from his perspective, he's absolutely 100% encountered this. So now we need to sort of go a little deeper. That's where people like yourself need to come in and go looking to find the truth. And I mean, that's a real interesting diluted word in of itself, truth, right? What is
Right.
what is that? So, there's weight to what the boy is saying, because he believes it. That's a true anchor. There's questionable, density of the actual entity. Now, I see entities in people's auras all the time, and they sort of shape shift and transform. And, that doesn't present itself at all. The energy that they're speaking of and they're claiming was present does not have that type of frequency. It from what I can see with the information I'm being shared, it's being looked at as an encounter that was artificially generated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a distinct possibility, because we do know our governments are putting forth an ET threat narrative, our secret governments, I should say, and do have that ability with, holograms and, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9G. If you look at some of the technology that's out there that even we know about, in terms of, these billboards where robot hands come out and whales are coming out of the gymnasium floors and things are flying through the sky, which are holograms, but look completely real. It's not out of the realm of possibility for something like this to be faked and really scare the pants off of somebody.
Yeah, I mean, that boy's not going to ever be the same. There's no question about it. Like, his faith, his belief system has been shaken to the very core. Now,
I suspect it's something along those lines, because there's a number of recent incidents like this. There's one in Peru, which was a very negative encounter, and I don't believe it for a second. It just does not match with my years of research, of interviewing literally hundreds of people, because I don't think the ETs are here to hurt us. There's a lot of fear and misinformation surrounding the subject, and it's really not warranted. It's because they've been around forever. They're not here to take over our planet or intentionally scare people or hurt them or anything like that. This is my assessment. Don't believe me? Look at the firsthand accounts, and I think that bears it out.
Yeah, no, I would have to agree with you. I've never come across what I call low frequency spirits or entities related to any sort of alien interaction. That has never been the resonance that I've encountered. And so, some people would consider certain identities as being problematic by the way they look. And when I describe them to people, if it's something they have an affinity with and a relationship with that presents itself in their auric field, it is a bonding and an expansion of their awareness. But then you get, some people that are I come across aliens that look very reptilian in nature, and so then people get a little apprehensive and all fearful. Within Taoism, we don't really look at things as good and bad. They're yin and yang. There's zero. Everything is as one. It becomes one. It becomes all. It becomes everything. It becomes nothing. So when you start presenting it in an avatar fashion that would represent sort of a dualistic perception, which is 99.9999% of people, because they're coming from that place of awareness. And that's where they get to level up. It's like there's something more. They encounter an entity, an alien, an experience that makes them realize there's way more than what's in front of them, presented as this 3D reality. It's changed. So now you kind of look at it. What would you say is the progression of our relationship with these energies? And now let's look at a little bit more about your encounters personally and other things that you can get sort of more deeper in that validated for you.
Yeah. Well, I know people love to label things. And a lot of people are looking through all of this through the lens of their own belief system, through the lens of fear. So it took me a while to really unpack what's going on, and I wanted to experience it myself, because it's one thing to interview someone or read about a person's encounters. That leads to a belief system, but not true knowledge. True knowledge only comes from personal experience. Then there's a huge gap between belief and knowledge. I wish more people would recognize that. So I really, really wanted to see it myself, and I pursued it aggressively in terms of all phenomena: ghosts, astral projection, UFOs, certainly, all these things, Bigfoot, you name it, because they're all connected to some degree, and they're all real, I think. But yeah, I wanted to see a UFO, and I did. It took a while. It took some years of doing this research, and because I was going down to, when someone said they'd seen a UFO, I would go to their house and I'd interview them. I'm like, sometimes they'll come 2, 3, 4 days in a row. This is a pattern, and I would camp out at their house in hopes of seeing something, and was generally not successful. I was in an area where there was high levels of UFO activity at the time. Topanga Canyon, in the mid 1990s, was having a wave of activity. So I would drive through there and I would see anomalous lights. I remember once I'm driving along and I'm like, wow, look at that. There is a big bright light right over that mountain. And, I've seen planes coming right at you. And then they turn and you're like, okay, that's a plane. But it doesn't look like it when it's coming right at you. Well, this big, big, big bright light winked out. It wasn't a plane. So I had a few sightings like that. And I'm like, well, that's ambiguous. I don't know what that is. It's certainly interesting. But I think my first real experience that was a sort of aha moment was in 1992, late July. I'm driving home from my brother Mark's house, actually. They were helping me, Mark and Christy, to sort of absorb all this, because they both had experiences. I hadn't really, so it was difficult for me, especially in the beginning. And it got late, so almost was approaching midnight. I'm like, I've got to go home. I've got to work. So I'm driving. This is in Woodland Hills, Southern California, a very dense suburb. They live on this tiny little street called Golondrina, and I'm just left their house, and I was about 3 minutes away, coming around this hairpin corner, when I saw what I thought was a bird swooping down towards my car, up and to the right, about 300 feet up. But I looked up and saw instantly it wasn't a bird, because it was glowing. And it's coming down in a parabola towards my car. And I'm like, wow, is that a firecracker? No, it wasn't a firecracker, because this darn thing came and stopped right in front of my windshield. And it was an orb, a little golf ball size, well, slightly larger, yellow-white orb, mostly white, hard edges, and stopped right in front of my windshield, right in front of my face. And then, of course, I'm thinking, well, reflection, even though I knew at this point it wasn't. So I'm moving my head back and forth, and this thing moved from one side of the windshield to the other 2 or 3 times, stopped again, right in front of my face. So by this point, I'm like, I know this is unusual. Who's ever operating this? This is an intelligence, clearly. And it was so close. It moved forward, away from me, dipped down and went straight up. The last thing I remember is gripping my steering wheel and watching this thing go straight up. And honestly, I think I had missing time because I forgot the whole darn thing. I didn't remember seeing it at all until some months later. And I wonder about that because having interviewed a lot of people, they've told me this sort of thing. Like a UFO landed and right in front of me on the road, and we didn't talk about it. In fact, we forgot about it. I'm like, how can you possibly tell me you forgot something this monumental? And they're like, I don't know what to tell you. Well, I get it now. So that was my first, and that turned out to be a huge year. It was a month later. I was up camping in Crater Lake area with the family, and Mark, Christy, and I stayed up late hoping to see UFOs, and we did. We had a big flashlight. We were going to call them down. And I'm like, this is not going to work. There were tall trees around us. There was a patch of sky, maybe that big, over us. So the chances of seeing anything were really remote. But Mark screamed out, I saw a light. I'm like, yeah, sure you did. He's like, no, hand me the flashlight. And we had a really powerful flashlight. And he flashed it. And darned if this light didn't flash back. And I could see at this point it wasn't anything. Because I've took astronomy in college. I'm very into astronomy. And of course, educated myself on all of these subjects on what a UFO might be misidentified as. And he flashed it twice, and it flashed twice back at us in a different location. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I mean, I went back from there, back to LA, joined a group where we called down UFOs with, Stephen Greer and CSETI. And we had a bunch of sightings, and just kind of, since then, I've had at least a dozen really good sightings and some much closer encounters.
Wow. So what do you attribute the almost like memory loss of the actual event? Now, personally, you get into certain states of awareness, that alter your reality, alter your lens. And, this is just, I attribute it to within Taoism, we do internal alchemy practices to access all dimensions at once and be able to alter things that are from a higher dimension in this 3D reality. Do you think perhaps these aliens were having some type of effect of wanting to change your brainwave, your state, to forget the encounter, or what do you attribute it to?
I wouldn't say that necessarily. Initially I thought, yeah, it goes, 'cause a lot of people do have missing time, and to experience it myself was like, wow, this happened to me. I think it's more of a two-way street, honestly, because I think this can be somewhat disruptive for a person to remember all this. And to me, I knew what I was going to be doing from a very young age. I was going to be a writer. I was going to tell amazing stories. I was going to educate the world. I knew this. It was in my heart from a very young age. And it wasn't about me. It was about basically sharing other people's experiences. And so I didn't want to become too personally involved and share my own story. And I kept that secret for a pretty long time because it wasn't about me. So I think that's partly it. And it can be somewhat of an interdimensional experience. You know how it's difficult to remember dreams sometimes for people. And you can have these very vivid nighttime experiences, and you're lying in bed and you wake up and you remember it all. But the second you sit up and start walking around, it leaves. I think there's an aspect of that going on as well. So I think it's up to the person themselves to really work hard to be able to recall. And I was able to do it eventually. I mean, I do have memories of being on board. So the memories, I think, if you want them, you can recall them. They're not gone. They're not erased. So that's kind of my take on it, which has evolved a little bit over the years, having interviewed a lot of people. Because I finally did interview this lady by the name of Dolly Saffron, who's my favorite contactee because she's got fully conscious encounters. no missing time, no fear. And she basically explained what's going on, which is along those lines. It's the people who choose not to remember because it can be very frightening for them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I find it really interesting that we are so saturated in fear that it's causing all kinds of problems, particularly with this subject, which shouldn't be any surprise because there is a deliberate campaign on terms of, our own highest levels of the military, perhaps the intelligence agencies, the Pentagon, and so forth. Not necessarily our standard government, but it's no joke. I mean, they are, I don't think, have our best interests in mind. I hate to say it, but this is, I think, easily borne out by just a little bit of study. The cover-up is demonstrably true. It's not speculation. It's easily proven. So I think there's a lot of factors going on here with our fear-based media and basically elements in society who are trying to, in essence, enslave and drug and dumb down the population and suppress psychic abilities. I got really into, astral projection at the same time that I started doing UFO research. I don't think that's a coincidence. I thought it was, wow, this is synchronistic. No, I think it was intentional and purposeful. And I worked hard at it to wake up and had a honest to God spiritual enlightenment and learned how to do astral projection and started having, a lot of clairvoyance and telepathy and precognition and doing astral projection and going to the other side, which is absolutely a part of this. And I think essential. It's one of the ET's missions, I guess I would say, to wake us up to our unlimited abilities, to our immortality, to our, I hate to call them supernatural or psychic ability, paranormal, because they're not. They're natural. This is the way we're supposed to be. We're supposed to remember what's going on with us at night. We're supposed to be able to read each other and know when someone is lying. So, yeah, it's all connected, I think, for sure.
I almost want to ask you, sure you don't think you're Taoist, maybe? Because this is the type of stuff that we train in for and have been for thousands of years. I mean, all the deeper discovery, internal alchemy, that's our bag. That where there isn't a system on the planet Earth or outside of the planet that comes even close to the internal alchemy processes that we developed thousands of years ago from our whisperings from the universe. So, for me, I've trained people in out-of-body astral projection, soul projection, clairsense training, clairvoyance, mediumship channeling, physical healing, manifestation. I've been doing this for over 30 years. And
Well,
all of the above is very real, and all of the above is very trainable. And, one of the things I think over history has sort of like through dictatorship of certain countries, specifically the origins of Taoism, has been problematic, and we've been erased from, basically the face of the earth. And we're slowly creating a resurgence because through the history of China, the emperors have always had their Taoist, advisor, which all the internal alchemy, all the magic, all the stuff that we get into at a much deeper level that goes way beyond the 3D reality. This 3D density is the slowest. This is the lowest expression of what reality is. And we're only perceiving the average person that hasn't been given more insight to understanding how to cultivate and return back to what they already know, probably 1% filter of what's really going on. And so, this is problematic. And so when you share this with me, I get all warm and fuzzy inside because that's what I do. That's what I have been doing for over 30 years. And this is something that's a Taoist processes for thousands and thousands of years. And we hand it down from generation to generation. And, even to this day, any sort of revealed internal alchemy processes from Taoist practices are fragmented. They're never really revealed because they're the secret sauce. You want to get into Harry Potter stuff, you start following a Taoist alchemy practice, and you will create realities that are beyond this 3D, because this is the distraction. This is, as my dear friend, a Buddhist monk, friend of mine, Martin, would say, the dukkha, the distortion, the it's like the carrot and the stick for, we're being distracted as really identifying with ourselves in the mirror as this human flesh and blood, and the limited capacity that we've been framed in from a sort of psychosis over thousands of years that represents itself in sort of a dualistic perspective. But the truth is, we're eternal, we're immortal. And so when you're able to start to access that, that's what the alchemical energetic practices are for. A Taoist goes deep into harnessing the 50 trillion cells within your physical body to direct and move and alter all things. That's the purpose of it. And so you're speaking my language, my friend. And, it's something that I find really incredible, because everyone comes to a realization at some point. If we're as a friend of the channel, Trey, would say, if you're a seeker, you're seeking, looking, exploring, expanding, wanting more, wanting to have a deeper knowing, and returning to your truth of who you really are. And so when you get these things, this is the epiphany of incredible conversations with incredible people like you, is these are slithers of another a reality that's really going on. And so we capture these moments where we're getting a much broader lens, and then for whatever the environmental circumstances are, or the lack of understanding of how to harness you as a tuning fork, as an instrument to be able to perceive all these layers, you're going to get a glimpse and then it disappears. Or when you've interviewed hundreds of people with face-to-face sightings, and then there's this level of amnesia that takes place where people are forgetting things. They're forgetting to remember to forget. Excuse me. This is a process. This is an altering state where you change people's brainwaves.
Yeah.
And they can, and that's why I was curious to hear from you, being so in depth and having so much history and relationship with this this topic, is that from an altering perspective of energy and different dimensions, you can alter someone's perception of reality quite simply when you understand how to access their brainwaves. So I was curious to hear what you have to say about that, because you can literally forget things very quickly if someone has the intention to alter that. And so it seemed to be a theme from your own admission, where you found one person that was very conscious, very clear, very alert, and has excellent recall to the very event, right down to the myopic parts. And then there's some situations, if through your interviews of hundreds of people, where people are forgetting and then they remember and then they remember to forget. It's kind of like, what? But it's sort of like it can be a trigger from your emotional content that is so intense that I just need to stuff that down. It's so much to comprehend as being so altering. And we're not microdosing anyone. All of a sudden you have this density, a 3D density that is not from this world. And you're like, whoa, how do I perceive this? And you will have what they call confusion, and you can literally erase the very experience, because it's such an overload that you go offline.
Exactly. When something is completely out of someone's worldview. can be very uncomfortable for them to absorb it, and they won't. They will
Right.
absolutely just reject it. But I
Right.
feel like ultimately all paths do lead to truth. At some point, we're all going to become enlightened. It's unavoidable.
Hmm.
And for me, I was researching all these topics largely for me, just to understand what was going on. And happy to be able to provide a signpost, or a little bit of a guide for others.
Yeah.
But yeah, my parents were raised very religious and rejected it. With three older brothers, they all went to church. They never took me to church, and I'm glad they didn't, because it allowed me to do my own research and find what resonated with me, what I was interested in, where my excitement was. And when I started meditating and learning how to do astral projection, I'm like, wow, this is absolutely what makes me happy, is self-work. And looking at other people who are still kind of stumbling around, it's amazing how almost robotic in their thinking behavior they are. Everyone's walking around guided by fear. The fear of death is basically the ruling force for so many people. And they're lost partly in the past and partly in the future, and not even living in the present moment. And there's all these things you learn as you go along this pathway of discovery. And I find it super fascinating. I mean, I love this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, astral projection is an interesting one. Do you have? Did you find clearly in through your exploration and your own method of practices? Have you got a specific method that it makes it really right here, front and center, a faster sort of? I remind people that when you explore physicality in the 3D and you operate within a dualistic perception, you will fall victim to that very fact that you are looking at up and down, in and out, left and right, good and bad. And from that, it could be problematic for you entering other states of awareness. And you sort of have to, it's almost like break those chains and change your lens and dial it out even more. And that sort of starts with sort of like the ground zero is your physicality, because you have this physical flesh and blood, which is a tuning fork to your very experience. So, I mean, I'm probably sure you would agree consciousness is all things. It doesn't retain itself within this physicality. It's an avatar, an expression of what you may perceive, the rest of the world may perceive as you within this 3D reality. But the truth is, all is one, one is all. And referring back to what you just said, present moment is all you have. And when you can access that present moment, identifying everything as energy, from that energy is a vibration, from the vibration is a frequency. And if you can resonate at that frequency, you can obtain a new viewpoint, a new dialed, expansive, conscious lens. And so there's so many different ways up the mountain to enter, beyond what someone, a physicist, would call the third, the fourth, the fifth dimension. What do you find is a good method of cultivation to access those states? And I imagine you've been doing it for so long that it's almost instantaneous for you to obtain that realization.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly a journey. In the beginning, I did have quite a few struggles and confusions. Uh, but, there's a lot of literature on this subject, not so much back when I started. So basically, for me, when I would, first had my first out of body experience, I was so overwhelmed with
Hmm.
emotion. And I learned, well, this is called the desire body, which I found super interesting, because I would become really excited. So excited, I got pulled right back in for almost a year. I mean, I literally could not stay out more than a couple of seconds up to a minute. Fear also was not a huge problem for me. I'm generally not a fearful person, but having interviewed and taught people how to do it, fear is a big barrier for some people. But then I deal with a lot of different emotions. Anger. I'm not an angry person. I'm really not. But popping out of body, it would come at me full force. I'm like, what is going on here? And gluttony, food. I became super hungry. These weird things I would have to work through. And I found it actually the astral dimensions, if you will, was actually a really good place to work it out, because I operated from the assumption from the beginning that astral projection is safe, which I believe it is. It's as safe as sleeping. We're all doing it every night. It's really just a matter of remembering. And frankly, it's a misnomer to call it astral projection, because we're really projecting down from the higher planes, which is our true home, down to here, where we're just staying temporarily in this third dimension. But yeah, it took a lot of work to really get clarity, because thoughts rule on these higher dimensions. And if you think something, boom, it could manifest instantly. So I dealt with a lot of that for a year or two until I finally learned how to slow down that stream of consciousness that's just racing through our heads at all times and pulling you into essentially delusion. So yeah, I mean, it just took work. I love self-work. I think it's essential that it's all about raising your awareness and discovering your autonomy and recognizing that you are, in fact, an integral part of this universe, that you have all the power of the universe within you. And I think it's a journey for each person. They go at their own pace, but it continues to be a grand adventure, because I'm always learning new stuff, even today. And now I'm doing a lot of pulling earthbound souls from the lower earth planes up to the higher realms, because apparently this is a problem. There's a lot of people wandering around here following their death who are very confused and upset, and wandering around in what we might call the hellish realms, or certainly lower realms. And that's super rewarding and really interesting, and I'm learning a lot. So I'm doing a lot of that right now. But yeah, it's a continuing journey. And I've gotten to the point where I can do it pretty easily, but there'll be periods of time where life catches up with you, and you've got bills to pay and work to do and car repairs, and I get caught up in the third dimensional life, and then I get back to it, because this is what brings me joy. This is what I think is absolutely what makes me happy. I guess that's the way I would put it, because I think we're all searching for happiness, for freedom, for answers. And because I would read books and books and books, I'm like, well, gosh, these are interesting, but it's not bringing me where I need to go. And you watch TV and you buy out stuff, you get more and more stuff, hoping this will make you happy. It doesn't. Money is definitely not the answer. So I think ultimately, it's a journey. You just keep on learning. And you think you're enlightened, and then you find out that there's another big mountain to climb. And it's like awesome, because I love that. I love that there's the eternal mystery of existence. Just to be, that alone is such a gift. And whenever I feel a little floundering, I'm like, well, you know what? I exist. And how cool is that? That is such an awesome gift. And I can't ask for more than that.
Yeah, it is. It's when you start to realize that the access and for a Taoist, it's critical to be able to see and feel and identify all the different layers of the energetic profiles that we're experiencing. And most people, because of their limited perception due to where they're starting out in their own journey of awareness, it can be problematic. And so most people approach things with a weekend workshop. I got into energy. I'm a Reiki master. I'm doing this. I'm a channeler. I had an experience. I read someone's aura. I'm psychic. I'm all these things, and they're all incredible starting points. There is no right or wrong way up the mountain. There are a zillion, infinite amounts of ways to acquire these states of awareness, what I call sensory perception. And I think that what sort of can potentially become problematic is how someone enters into these states and then what they do with it, because I find most people are chasing the proverbial spiritual dragon to acquire a result, and they get what we call a glimpse, and then they're spending the rest of their natural born life looking for another repeatable experience. And so, when you return to things that can be repeatable, a replicated sort of state, i.e., astral projection, out of body, these types of abilities, starting with something as simple as meditation to acquire a different gear shifting in how you're experiencing what you're feeling at this present moment. So these are all sort of like, a place where you start, and then you go, okay, now what am I going to do with this? Because I find that I've had teachers over, when I first started in this game, and I kind of got a jump start, remembering who I was 30 years ago, instantly identifying with, the last, 100. I could go back to 1,000 lives if I wanted to, but the last 100 were more reflected and applicable to what I'm experiencing right now in this incarnation. And so it just instantly realized my immortality, who I really am, and I was able to remember. And so from that, you acquire, it's like being in, the Avengers Academy of supernatural level ups. You tap into it instantaneously. So clairvoyance and channeling and things of that nature were instantly revealed to me, and I remembered them almost like that second.
Yeah.
And so there's
I have a lot of past life recall when I did astral projection, but there was something I read once about, I think it was in Tibetan Buddhism, where they talk about the siddhis, I think that's pronounced, the supernatural abilities such as levitation and superhuman strength, immunity to fire. They said these are actually markers which will appear when you're on the pathway towards spiritual enlightenment. But they also call them obstacles, because to work towards just having those abilities is the wrong way to look at it. It's not about that. It's not about what you can do. It's about raising your awareness and finding out who you are, and those are just signposts and shouldn't be a goal. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool, because as fun as it is to, I always love it when you have a little bit of precognition and all this stuff that happens daily. And you're like, wow, I just was thinking this, and can go out of body and knew what that person's thinking or what have you. It's not the goal. It's ultimately, in my mind, about love and awareness, love and truth. So ultimately, I just loved that quote, because that made a lot of sense to me and kind of shifted the way I was looking at things. Like, it's not about trying to become a super powerful, psychic. It's really about just growing your awareness and your ability to love and explore the universe.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. I mean, it's a resonance. It's a resonance. So, I've come across many people, including myself. I can access information very easily. I can be a facilitator for instant physical healing that you'll witness with your eyes open, going, whoa. I mean, I've seen it all. And, you get to a certain point where those things are helping level up people's consciousness. So, just say envelop my forearm with anesthesia, and I ran a skewer through my forearm, pulled it out, and you wouldn't see the exit or entry point. That makes you look at reality. Now, this is just part of the cultivation of saturating the energy. So from a channeling perspective, there's certain layers that you get through. And when you're channeling direct source information, spiritual talk these days would refer to it as, halls of a mente, Akashic records, however they want to see it. It's a very popularized sort of like lens that people are looking through to access high states of consciousness. Is it wrong? No, but I think people should identify when they're a part of a psyop. And so, it's sort of like they they tend to feel like it's me. And that indicator is an instant red flag, as you just, through your own admission, came to that realization that, it's not about embodying one superpower. That's a side effect, right? That's a side effect of your journey. And, again, your truth is the only truth you need to be concerned with. I never, ever dismiss someone else's belief system. It's like dismissing my own. So where you're at that journey level is truly like the old expression, what is it? The truth is in the eyes of the beholder, or the value, the beauty, whatever you want to call it. So you're going to get on that path, and you get to a certain point. And, I've come across a couple of people, and what's really, you mentioned the sitters, you mentioned, samadhi, Shiva, Shakti, these type of like definitions of, maybe a yogic path or a Hindu path or a Buddhist path. These are sort of very much part of identifying your expression through your own journey. And so, within Taoism, you want to create your ultimate relationship is with the universe, and to obtain that present moment, the now, is what we call the Wu Ji, which is between the breath in and the breath out. Between yin and yang is this present moment, the stillness, the Wu Ji, the mother of all things, the Tao. And, we have that enlightened, expansive moment. You and I are sharing in that. We're feeling the amplitude, the openness that comes from just those few words, because they're so integrated into this ancient practices that are thousands of years old, and we can resonate with that. There's a palpability to it. And so a lot of people sort of tend to go, I had a glimpse, and this is going back to what we're talking about. Then I start pursuing it, and I get my own version of whatever that is. And I don't think that's problematic if you're able to continue to develop that state and your lens continues to get wider. If you get a little taste and you realize you can read people's minds, or maybe you can heal someone, or you can generate energy, and you sort of sit there and you make that you identify as you, just as you mentioned just previously. It's like that is part of the on the road of the journey to something greater. And when you say love, I really appreciate that. But it's presented right now in this new age spirituality more in a hallmark sort of throwaway. And so a lot of people have a subjective. People always start out with a subjective version of love. It's just a human condition, right? So, love to someone might be razor blades and bunny rabbits, and to someone else it's unicorns and rainbows. It's not until you start resonating higher and you dissolve the distraction of your humanness, your some of your life experiences that would present themselves as a narrative, which would then alter your lens and manipulate how you perceive things, the dukkha. And so I always tell people, I'm not asking you to erase your personality. That would be a mistake. That was given to you as part of your experience in this reincarnation. What I want you to do is to start looking at it like you can take it on and off. So if you want to create a state of awareness that's beyond this 3D reality, beyond our conversation, that's a beautiful thing. What happens with that is you can move your personality to the side. I teach people how to, and this is very simple. Your emotions don't control you, you control your emotions. This is kind of like the gateway level of a human being, first identifying with, hang on a second, I thought that was just part of the programming. I don't have any control over that. Oh, yes, you do. So when you start to realize you can move it like icons on a computer screen, and I can teach you how to take your emotions, put it in the corner of the room, roll over, play dead, stay there, and that's your personality. You can truly be the present moment, which is first person, third person, no person, where you are now, really now. You are now. And so what does that mean? It means that this is not a dialogue. This is a monologue. If you truly understand and you have embodied the now, you are all things. That means that you can alter all things. So anyone that has an absolute, like I'm an absolutist, and I'm like, okay, what does that mean? I'm an astrologist. I'm an astronomist. I'm a numerologist. I'm a physicist. I'm a healer. I'm a light worker. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm a psychologist. I'm a neurologist. I'm a neuroscientist. I'm a quantum physicist. If you come from that, you're very limited. This present moment that Preston and I are talking about is so it's beyond leveling up this dimension. It's like when you access that, as you would put it, a sitter that is a sitter of all things, which is the now moment, the mother of all things, the Tao. Now it's a monologue. That means that you're not asking yourself if you want to affect change in any dimension, which is part of the internal alchemy from a Taoist perspective, training in Nigong, training in Nidan. Nidan being internal alchemy, Nigong being internal power. You can alter all dimensions at once. This is a supercharged steroid version of multitasking. And that's what really makes a difference. So that means that through for the audience, Preston's admission earlier of when you get out of this plane and you're in another dimension, your intention, your thoughts materialize instantaneously. And so we talk about understanding that everything is light to wave to particle to matter. These are the constructs when you put your attention intention. Nothing is formed without your attention intention, and how it presents itself in what sort of wavelength and how fast it is. It slows down within a 3D reality. It's as if, imagine for the user that wherever your attention intention goes, you're literally cutting out from this seamless, limitless cloth a shape that forms whatever you're perceiving. And then it has its own signature, which turns it into energy, vibration, frequency, resonance. And now you're forming these things, and they all have their own sequence. Their own synchronicity is acquired through a resonance. And so once you acquire it, and some people talk about money, and through your admission, you're like, oh, money's overrated. It's not a big thing. And that's through your journey. A lot of people tend to be caught up in that because they're in lack of. And it's kind of like in the same situation through your own admission. You were like, I wanted it. And it took me a while. It was work for me to find it. And you got it. And so a lot of people, that would be from an energetic perspective, because really everything is just light forming energy that is created. That's it. I mean, energy, frequency, vibration, it doesn't get any easier than that. But when you flow into it, it becomes realized. So I imagine through your own conscious lens, as you expanded, you just fell into that present moment that made it realized. So astral projection, psychic abilities, all these types of things, precognition that you mentioned. These are all just ways to look at the consciousness. And within Taoism, we call it the diamond, another facet of the diamond. And, it's all a diamond. You're just looking at it at a different angle. And so with that love, what is that like? Because I always tell people, when you start to resonate higher, your perception or subjection or subjective viewpoint will be altered to a universal one that becomes selfless as you resonate higher. And so we always start with love, and love initially becomes is a subjective expression of yourself. And then you go to gratitude, which is more a universal thing where you don't have to attempt to perceive something. If I give you $5 to tell you you're good looking, you go, oh, well, thank you. Well, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. It's really interesting because when I found out UFOs were real, and then I started going out of body, it collapsed my belief system completely. And I started to realize, you know what? Belief systems aren't all that helpful. You just want to pursue knowledge in its, purest form. I would go out of body and I'd come back and I'd become so empathetic that I almost, lost sense of self. And I would feel what other people were feeling as strongly as you would feel your own emotions.
Mm-hmm.
There was a guy in Hawaii who was very effective at healing people. And they asked him, "How do you do this?" He says, "Well, I am the entire universe. I'm just healing myself," is how he looked at it. I thought that was really interesting because you definitely get a sense of that when you do astral projection. There's a lot of people who've had near-death experiences, and they'll come back and they start giving money away to complete strangers. Their husbands and wives are like, "What are you doing? Why are you giving this complete stranger?" Because they've learned that we are all one. And it's a really cool thing. I think we have a tendency to think of ourselves as individuals and we stop right here at our skin, but we don't. I don't think we do because, we're breathing in and out. Every noise a person makes, you hear that. We affect each other in so many ways. And even if you don't think you're telepathic, you are, because that is a natural state. You're just perhaps not woken up to it, but it's influencing your behavior. I mean, we can see this with mob mentality, and when something happens, it's a big news event, it sweeps through the population, and everyone is basically empathizing with it. So, yeah, I really like what you're saying here because it's exactly how I feel. And ultimately, it's that sort of selfless love and gratitude. It's like, because, I've tried praying every now and then, and all I can really do is just be thankful for just having this gift of existence. And, you kind of, thoughts are things. I love that phrase because you find that out on the other side when you're astral projecting. It's like a laser cannon. I mean, thoughts are extremely powerful. And we don't necessarily sense that here in the third dimension, but they're equally powerful. And you can start to pick it up. You can see the thoughts swirling around a person if you have any, psychic ability, which we all do. Let's face it, this psychic ability is not the realm of any one person. So, yeah, I think it's just an interesting, to be down here in the third dimension and have to kind of lift yourself up out of delusion and fear and all of this stuff, and you kind of get a breath of fresh air every now and then, and you're just like, wow, this is what I love. And you see people who are, creating lack by, basically focusing on it. You get what you focus on. And if you're always saying, well, I want money, I want money, I want money, you're going to be in a state of wanting money. And if you can just move like, I'm rich, I am well, I'm doing well, you start to move into that. So it's just a wonderful place to learn stuff here in the third dimension. I think we can learn stuff down here that is different on the other side. This is a tough school, but gosh, the stuff we can learn here, I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. There's so much suffering and pain and fear. There doesn't have to be. There really doesn't have to be.
Yeah, and that really, again, perception, how you come into it, what your past lives are helping you identify in your own journey, and really being able to decipher really clearly what it is that you're experiencing. So getting transmissions from an emotional state, starting as that baseline, realizing that is distortion, and then now coming into how your immediate guides, wherever your consciousness is, as you level up, they start to become a bigger horde of awareness, another facet of the diamond, more consciousness, and then the amplitude of information becomes like self-evident, that you can reflect on the 3D reality and go, whoa, man. Like, I teach people psychic reading. I just call it an aura reading, psychic reading, and I'm very a matter of fact about it. It becomes like reading off a menu, and people are like, how do you do that? I'm like, I just see the auras and energy that's swirling in and around your physical body, and it with that is attached an emotion and a virtue, and within that it will give me your psychological, mental, emotional, spiritual, physical state, and I just read it off the menu, and that's where people get, how did you do that? It's like I'm just reading the information. The biggest key factor to this is not attempting to make it about you, where a lot of people are like, well, I am marvelous Marcus, the wonder psychic. And when I speak, everything is realized. And so I'm going to tell you what your aura is and everything about you. And I'm going to give you deep insight. And then that person is actually looking for validation and acceptance. And, if for any reason they're not validated, the emotional content really sucks the energy out of the space itself, and it becomes problematic. And in 99% of the cases, they're very way off. The dukkha is distorting their perception and getting deep into the information. They had this glimpse, like we spoke of. They got a taste, and then they just ran with it without realizing that you can master this state and really refine it so it becomes a useful tool, not something that's transitory and is underdeveloped, because you want to create the homeostasis. Everything needs to flow. All the energy centers need to be synchronized. When you synchronize them, when you lead with your head, you lead with your heart, you get a gut feeling, it's 100% accurate. When you're sort of like the energy is distorted, it's turbulent, it's stagnant, you're going to get mixed information that would be problematic and would not be as accurate as you would like it to be. And that's when people get very defeatist, because, oh, I had it and now it's lost, but I'm going to play this game of running around getting approval from people telling me I'm an amazing psychic, yet because I'm invested in it emotionally, and when people tell me I'm wrong, it just buries me deeper and deeper into this state of being confused, lost, direction. And this sort of then presents itself into oppression, depression, possession. And so you go real deep on this stuff. And so many people are doing it. I as someone who's been doing this for over 30 years consciously and many lifetimes before this, all I suggest, I just kindly recommend that they expand on whatever it is that is resonating with them. And
exactly. Follow your excitement.
develop it so it can be a useful guiding fork and tool for your exploration of this very moment. And so most people are still programmed. We refer back to this mind melting group mentality, and they're programmed right now. It's very fashionable. I feel energy. That's it. I don't need to go any further. I know I can feel energy. I can read auras. I can do. And the problematic effect of that is, if you're operating in duality, when you start becoming a light worker, a massage therapist, an acupuncturist, a Chinese medicine doctor, a healer of any kind, whether it's a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a therapist, a Chinese, a chiropractor, a functional medicine doctor, you are entering into your ego. You have an identity. And that's why most people are like, I had no idea you taught everyone all this stuff. Yeah, I'm just a dusty old priest that happens to do all this stuff. And so, people get sort of like, holy moly, wow. Yeah, because it's all under one blanket. That's how it should be. It should be realized that you can access all this stuff once you regulate your energy centers. Understand, ladies and gentlemen, ladies, everything is energy, everything. And so you really need to find a system that does not have you fall into, and we spoke about this catalyst earlier. Fear will be your suggestibility. Fear will be problematic because this is an emotional state that creates confusion, and when that happens, you will be suggestible. That means that things will enter on a much deeper layer into your psyche, into your physicality, into your what you would perceive as consciousness. And so if you're operating in energy and you want to heal people, seems to be, and I've had teachers that 30 years ago, I'm energy healers and whatnot. They're dead now. They're not present. They're not alive. They're not breathing in this 3D reality because they made it about themselves. And when you make it about yourself, you are using your life force, and you do not have to use the life force.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult lesson for a lot of people to learn.
Right. It's like
you see so many people who are struggling with, whether it's fear, it might be greed, it might be anger. Laziness is a big one. There's so many people who have just no ambition whatsoever to improve themselves. So I think a lot of people who are down here on this planet are dealing with what we would call, the deadly sins, which is, I think, a loose term, but I certainly see it with people. And if you can, because it steals your awareness, it steals your attention, and attention and intention are so key to all of this. But just learning to overcome the ego, I think, is really difficult for a lot of people, which, I suppose it's neither here nor there. But like I said earlier, I really do feel like sooner or later, all paths do lead to truth. And I kind of look at everyone here on this planet as flowers, and some are blooming and they're just gorgeous and they're giving out scent and their colors and drawing all sorts of attention, where others are tight little packed buds who still need light and water, but they're nevertheless absolutely beautiful and precious and as valuable as any other flower out there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I was just returning back to that whole energetic part, because what happens is, within a Taoist path, we saturate the physicality so that, what happens is you have Jing, which is your constitution. You enter into this realm and enter into this physicality, this flesh and blood you see before you, and you have what we call the battery pack. And, when you look at your cell phone, I'm down 20%, I'm up 30, I need to charge it, whatever. Well, everyone has their own Jing. And so that would be inherently sort of like hereditary, genetic disposition, ancestors, all that kind of good stuff. Well, that is nothing more than a baseline. And that operates within this 3D reality, which we call duality. And so while you're in duality, you're going to be subject to these very limitations and frameworks. Once you access and go beyond that, and that comes from your own cultivation, your own awareness, you're now able to level this up. So within an alchemist processes of a Taoist, we take that battery. Most people come in at 80% of their 100. You charge the battery up, you get to 100%, and then we go further than that. Your 100 then turns into 1,000, your 1,000 then turns into 10,000, and you are forever saturating this physical flesh as a level up for longevity, to lengthen that. And so then you start to understand the difference between your life force and accessing all things at the present moment. And then by doing this, you will never be, it will never be problematic. It will never be an issue for you when you're entering into a space that perhaps you might be, from all intensive purposes, within this latest sort of spiritual consciousness. We call them psychic vampires. Media calls it a Karen. I think it's a little derogatory and probably reflected more of some type of like discrepancy of how you see things. But the reality is there's a drawer. As you said, someone's taking your attention away from you, and it draws from you. And so mastering that and understanding that when you're in a space where these things are happening. Now, this could be reflectant of something that has been coined over many decades. I think first reference was from a guy by the name of Bob Monroe, the loosh. there's an underlying energy that will draw from your attention, your energetic field. Now, this is really interesting because a friend of the channel, Alexis from Ascension Diaries, she reads the Schumann resonance of the earth. And so that would be reflected on us. We are all things, right? So the magnetic field of our bodies are really a representation of the magnetic field of the earth. And so you can tap into the brain waves of other people, as we've already discussed with the audience. And so the resonance of the earth is at a 7.83 on average, which would lie you right in between theta, sort of like potentially sort of alpha, theta sort of state, right? So now we're down in this brainwave state, which makes you really chill, calm, lucid, open to change. This is the transmission. Now, from her own admission, she's realizing there's an artificial alteration of that resonance, which is now bringing it up into the 12, 18, early 20s. Now, for anyone that doesn't understand what that means that it's being artificially inflated from something somewhere that is creating a resonance within the planet Earth of a beta, high beta brainwave. Now, that is generally what happens when you wake up in the morning. You're out, your chemistry creates serotonin, then you go off to the races, you start operating your day. Light enters your retina, and we're off to the races. Now, that's the basic alchemical processes, but the brainwave can be altered. Like, so, you know, if you're a high beta, you have a high anxiety, your spleen is in excess, and this is part of how you perceive reality, and you enter the world with the brainwave that just makes you alert, and then you can go even higher in frequency, and then all of a sudden it can become problematic, where you know, add a couple of cups of coffee, a few confrontations, emotional content, and now you're not being the now, you're the rat in the wheel asking why.
Yep.
Right. So there's this admission, there's some artificial manipulation of this brainwave. Now, what's going on also is, which I got the same message from my teachers, was that there's going to be an incredible expansion of consciousness, but not in a way that would in any way reflect what someone would perceive as negative. But she even saw that over the next year and a half to 2 years, the actual resonance of the earth is going up into the 40s and 50s. Now, that would be more probably parallel to a lot of the prophets and messaging of a lot of channelers that are saying that they're seeing this awakening of consciousness for the year of 2024-25. That would make a lot more sense to me. I got that from my teachers before people were spurting out these sort of like predictions. And then moreover, when someone sort of starts with fear, and this is an admission that Preston and I talk about, is sort of problematic. Like I would step back for a minute when someone wants to lead with that starting emotional state. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, well, I think people are at this point have reached the point where they're exhausted with living in fear and all the negativity that's saturating our society. I mean, we're drenched in it, and I think at some point people just get tired and they're looking for a new way of thinking. And this is what I love about UFO encounters, because when someone has a UFO encounter and it comes down, it's completely out of their worldview. There's really high strangeness aspects, and they're basically in a second, just in a real one moment, challenged, not only physically, but mentally, spiritually, psychically, all of it, emotionally. And they are now moving instantly into a new paradigm, into a completely new way of thinking out of the box, and starting to wake up. And so I do see that for sure, that there is a great awakening. There are steps towards disclosure by our own government, and it's bringing a lot of people into the awareness that we are not alone. And that's a big goal on the part of the ETs. This is one of their main goals, is to just wake up everyone here on Earth to the fact that, you know what, we're not alone in this universe. There are other people out there just like you, who have moved beyond all the war and disease and unequal distribution of wealth and divisiveness and hatred. So I think it's a good time for humanity. We learn a lot from difficult experiences. My mom passing away was really what sparked my big change, because I wanted to find out if there was life after death. It was the most difficult experience I've ever gone through, but it changed everything for me and ended up having a wonderful silver lining to it. And I think we need to start looking at that when someone is just overwhelmed with life and they're going through all kinds of negativity. There's a lesson there that you can learn from. And when you start doing what you're supposed to be doing, it's like the red carpet rolls out in front of you and doors open and you really start to grow quickly. And I think that's what's beginning to happen. I really think people are just reached the point where, like, you know what, it's time to grow up. It's time to wake up. And I'm excited about it.
And so this is so refreshing hearing your insight into, especially the nature of aliens, UFOs, extraterrestrials. And I would ask you this: what out of all these? I mean, how many interviews have you interviewed? What, a couple of hundred people at this point over your career?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's probably closer to in the thousands, but formally, yeah, it's several hundred.
Wow. And what do you think the common theme is is there one? Maybe there isn't. Maybe there's a thread of commonality that would present itself that you've identified with through your own journey. Have you noticed anything?
Oh yeah. Yeah, when someone has a face-to-face encounter with ETs or is taken on board one of their craft and interacts with them, it follows a pretty set pattern. Not that there's not disinformation and fear and outright lies, because there is. And some of what's out there is just not true. And it's muddying up the waters. So I think we have to be really careful when we're looking at all these experiences people are describing, because some of it is not ET. It's what we call MyLabs or government psyops, where they use drugs and mind control technology that is dastardly. I mean, it's not okay. But when someone has a genuine encounter with ETs and they're pulled on board, the most common thing they will experience is first the ET saying, "Don't be afraid. There's no need to fear. You're fine. We're not here to hurt you. No harm will come to you." That sort of thing. It's every single time.
Wow.
Which I think speaks volumes to their intentions, because they're not here to hurt us. Next, they will often be physically examined. And this is so difficult for people because we're, such a fearful people. And this is where a lot of people say, this was negative. I didn't ask for this. I didn't like it. It terrified me. Now I have PTSD and nightmares. I can't sleep without the lights on. I need double locks on my doors. When the whole time, the purpose of that is actually just a checkup. And this is when people get healed. I wrote a book. My first one was UFO healings, but I expanded that into another book, The Healing Power of UFOs, which documents 300 cases. This is a primary goal on the part of ETs, is healing. They're all about maintaining the best of our genetics. So that is absolutely a pattern. And when someone doesn't have a whole lot of fear, they're not in complete panic, they start to realize, this is not so bad. This is actually really interesting, and they're trying to communicate with me. And they will. And this is when the fun begins, because they will take you down to often what we would call the engine room. And they'll explain in detail why we don't need fossil fuels and why they're destroying our planet, and that there are alternate sources of energy. Anti-gravity, they actually power their craft by harnessing the magnetic fields, the gravitational magnetic fields of our planet. And then they'll take you up to like an observation deck, and they'll show you the stars, and it's breathtaking when this happens. I've had this experience, and you just never see anything. It's so beautiful. And you can see the Earth down below, or they'll take you to see the moon or even other planets. And this may sound like science fiction to skeptics, but I'm telling you, it's real. Because so many people describe this. They will take you to the control room. So here's how we fly the craft.
Mhm.
Without exception, it's psychically. Their ET technology is very much psychically integrated. That's what it's all about, consciousness. They will sit you in the pilot seat and actually teach you how to let you do it. Not as uncommon as you might think. So these are the patterns I see. Another big one is they are imparting knowledge. They will talk to you about your own life path. Like, what do you want to do with life? How can we facilitate it? What is your excitement? What are you hoping to accomplish in this lifetime? They will dispense dietary advice, like stop eating so much sweets. You need to stop smoking. It's not good for you. You're eating way too much meat. This is not okay. They will provide messages such as warnings against nuclear proliferation. That's a huge one. Almost everybody gets that because they're very upset about our use of nuclear material really in any capacity, because we're poisoning our planet and ourselves and areas that we're not even aware of. Also, they give warnings about greed and corruption, our warlike ways, aggression, the unequal distribution of wealth, prejudice thoughts, divisiveness, the hatred that we're trying to overcome, pollution, the chopping down of forests. These are the messages they're giving, which is very positive. If you look at this objectively, because people will say, "Oh, no, it's so scary. I was kidnapped." Like, you actually agreed to this. Most people will at some point come to that realization. Not everyone, but above and beyond that, the whole onboard experience is an opportunity for an incredible spiritual awakening and psychic awakening. Because that's almost without exception. It's the rule. People come back from their encounters and they start having astral projection and remote viewing and healing. Healing is a big part of it. But even physical levitation. I wrote a book on levitation and it's real. This is something we can all do.
Oh yeah, I mean I've witnessed it myself with two people that I know. They can do.
Yeah. So these are what the ETs are trying to teach us, just to let us know they're here. We're not alone. You're okay. You are us. We are you. We are one. Leave fear behind. Love is the answer. That comes up over and over again. Everything we need to know, we can learn from the natural world around us. We have all the power of the universe within us. And yes, please stop hurting yourselves, each other, and your planet. So I think we're very, very lucky to have this level of intervention, because it really ramped up starting with the modern age of UFOs in 1947, which is when exactly we had the ability to completely annihilate ourselves. And we're on a pathway of irreversible damage to our environment. So they're not coming down and fixing everything, because as every parent knows, you cannot spoon feed your child and tie their shoes for them and dress them. We have to solve our own problems. And they say this over and over again to people. We can't do it. You have to do the work. You made your bed. You made these problems. It's up to you to solve them. So yeah, I think it's great that we have that awareness is coming to so many people that we are being visited. And I think ultimately, despite what our governments would have us believe, our secret governments, or the media, or some of these disinformation agents, this is really good news for us. They are here to help. Their mission is one of guiding, healing, teaching, warning, and waking us up to our own immortality and our own pretty much unlimited abilities.
Wow. So when you look at there was a first, I had a guest that actually mentioned back in the 30s, there was a guy that created some type of like floating object that literally was able to hover using the reverse cycling of air through what would seem like a torus field within this object, and it was using the energy of space to gravitate, and that technology was either purchased from him or taken from him. He alluded that it was taken by another agency. Now that agency, then all of a sudden, coincidentally, there seemed to be more sightings of unidentified flying objects. What are your thoughts on that? Is there any validity to this? Have you heard this before? Or, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, this is really interesting you say that, because this is relates to people being taken on board and shown how these craft work and power themselves. And they're given very detailed instructions. There's a good number of cases of people who've basically been taught how to construct what we would think of as free energy or perpetual motion devices or anti-gravity. And for that matter, our own governments have gotten a hold of this technology in terms of UFO crash retrievals, like Roswell, the Roswell UFO crash of 1947. And there's an incredible campaign to suppress technology. And this is absolutely demonstrable. You can see this. It's provable. T. Townsend Brown might be the guy you're talking about, or the Hutchinson effect, because that sounds familiar, because both those are two men who've, Tesla, for that matter, who was very advanced in trying to get this technology to share with the world, and it's suppressed. Mm-hmm. Look at the history of the electric car. Boy, the oil industry did everything they could to stop the progress of that, which is not particularly good for the environment, it turns out, all the batteries. But yeah, the suppression of technology is such a shame. But the ETs will not hand over technology willingly. There's a lot of that going around, like, oh, they're trading technology in exchange for allowing, quote, abductions. I won't use that word because it offends a lot of the contactees I talk to. They feel like it's a positive experience. But ultimately, the ETs say we really need to grow spiritually first. That's paramount. And we are at the point now where we can see that because we're abusing technology. Our governments have hold of healing technology that can stitch up wounds instantly and detect tumors and do all kinds of anti-aging things, which is such a shame because that's being suppressed. And there's some people who could really use it. But ultimately, we don't need cell phones if we were telepathic. All the stuff that technology can do, we can do psychically. Teleportation is a real thing. There are people on this planet who are essentially immortal, enlightened masters. I wrote an article about this. Do immortal beings exist? And there's some good evidence that they do. Might not be a whole lot of them. But the point is, we can do things if we just grow spiritually. And we wouldn't need a lot of the technology that is basically destroying us because it's being abused.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it becomes sort of, I mean, these are ancient techniques that have been within Taoism for thousands of years. We train in all this stuff. It's very real, very tangible. This is the secret sauce that why people pursue the internal alchemy of Taoism, because you become one with all things, and then you can pretty much. I've seen it all. Physical healings, like I mean, I could go down the list, but there's nothing I haven't seen. And so for that, I agree 1,000,000%, and all of the above. So now you sort of have this sort of like system where it's being sort of overseen and trickled out and being sort of stifled and limited. Because I mean, really, electromagnetism is represented within this 3D reality, but the energy that we're speaking of goes beyond this 3D. We're in a different, chi, prana, Tao, universe, Buddha, God. That is not the same wave of energy. That's different. It's completely different. It's not in the same frequency, And so, when you tap into that, you effectively see things that are what people would consider miracles. But as you said, this is really within all of us. Now we have to remember. And,
Exactly.
these are the types of things with the incredible conversation that you and I are having today is how people come to that realization, that epiphany. Now, would you say, I'm assuming, and it's an assumption that you're in California, right?
I
So,
was. I moved out of California to the East Coast, the Blue Ridge Mountains.
right,
I had to get out. There was so much traffic and a lot of negativity and
yeah, yeah,
prices, and I mean, it was very chaotic there.
yeah, yeah. So, California is an interesting spot. I'm not a fan, but I don't need to live there. That's why I don't. But Nevada has incredible hotspots and activity. So part of the Taoist practices is turning yourself into a body dowser. So you can measure all different types of frequencies, identify vortices, power centers, ley lines, and then start to construct things, which is more of an ancient practice that um, belief systems, ancient religions used to do. It was very much part of the processes of finding the perfect spot that would emulate and admit the highest frequency of their expression of their connection with God, Tao, Buddha, a sacred space, a church, a temple, whatever it is. It seems to be a lost art form that's problematic, and people are just dumping places of worship on any sort of old space instead of what we consider within Taoism, we call it feng shui, where we're making sure everything in the environment outside of you and inside of you is all aligned so you can resonate to the highest frequency. And so it seems to be this type of space that I'm in is of a high frequency where you're getting a tremendous amount of like activity, sightings and whatnots that are not in the city of Las Vegas. They're outside of the city of Las Vegas. And I get channeling spirits and entities for 30 years. I get good old fashioned people like what's his name? Just a couple of months ago, I had Art Bell in my ear for weeks on end, just like a complete pain in my ass, quite frankly. And just giving me all this information, and it was sobering. He was not alluding to things; he was outright telling me things that were, first and foremost, I didn't die of natural causes. I'm like, oh, interesting. Whoa. Well, what does that mean? And so, you become this catalyst and conduit of information. And what I do is like, I sort of measure it up. It's like, well, what do you want me to do with it? If you want me to be your bullhorn and your little soapbox, that's problematic for me. I don't mind listening, and I don't mind sharing it in conversations like we're having right now, but I'm not going to get on,
right.
a whole platform and start pumping this stuff out. So you probably want to move right along to the next person that's listening. But it was fascinating him sharing a lot of this information. And, he was a resident of Nevada, a resident just outside of Las Vegas. And that's where he transmitted his whole radio show.
That's right. Yeah.
So, I didn't realize that. I didn't even realize he was around the corner. I was like, holy moly, that's right. And that's why, as neighbors, you need to listen to me. I'm like, that's questionable. So, I had a nice little convo with him for a couple of weeks. And I said, you know what? I think you need to find someone else to peddle your whatever it is that you're into. I agree with you. It's not good that you're still earthbound and you're right in it. Because, when spirits are earthbound, you referred to this before, it's problematic because they're just the sum of their life experiences. They're not insightful as a high resonance, another facet of high, all things. They're still presenting what they are expressing, even though they are not of this material form, physical flesh. They're still trapped within the some of their life experiences, this presentation of that. Does that make sense? And
Yeah,
so
sure.
the information is not exactly the greatest, but it's absolutely sobering and to the point, relevant to their timeline. And so, crazy stuff that he was talking about. That, I mean, I didn't even realize that he got into UFOs and paranormal and all this kind of stuff. And he'd been talking about this stuff for a long time. And
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of people really liked listening to what he had to say. And my goodness, the stuff that he was a lot. And so I'll end it and start it with, yeah, he tells me he didn't die of natural causes. I'll leave it at that. And
Wow.
other than that, holy moly, it just became so huge that I didn't want to even go there. It was like, that's a powder keg. You can keep it. It's
Wow.
like, whoa, that is like some crazy stuff, my friend. You know how we get, you and I would be more familiar with this, where there's this terminology through the years that was crafted by certain, three-letter organizations to create a dismissal. So if you're a conspiracy theorist, you're cuckoo.
Yep.
You don't want to actually have an opinion on something. We will dismiss you immediately. Oh, you're one of those. I get it. And people don't realize they're just literally falling into that mindset, and they're being controlled by a narrative that is just out there. And you literally are being puppeteered just with a dialogue like that. And it's problematic, in my opinion. Yet I would say he's beyond that category. He's got way too much information, but I don't want it. It's not. Well, what is it? It's not my hill to die on. Put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can't blame him for trying, because that was basically his mission.
Yeah. And I mean, he brought in this other character, and she was at me for several weeks, Dolores Cannon. Oh my goodness. That was an interesting one. And again, I mean, guys, what do you want me to do? I mean, I'm walking my own path, find someone else that wants to resonate with your stuff and have them fall on the proverbial sword. I am not. I will not. I'm listening, and we'll start and end there. I mean, some of the stuff that was coming out of those guys was like, I just don't, I ain't going there. It's not happening. And, so when you and I have conversations, it's quite refreshing. It's just, this is reality, guys. So,
Well, I prefer to focus on the positive stuff,
right.
What we can do to improve ourselves and each other, as opposed to, focusing on the nefarious elements within our society.
Yes. Amen to that, my brother. Amen to that. And so, you've had 30 books over your career, and you've written one a year. How has that sort of been accepted within the community? Have you been helping a lot of people by getting insight through your documenting and scripting out your firsthand accounts and interviews and insight? And what is the book? And I'm assuming you haven't written one yet this year, or you're in the middle of it. What book is it that you're writing this year to add to the repertoire?
Well, I did just put one out called Not From Here, Volume 5.
Okay.
It's all about the more unusual types of UFO encounters. I'm working on Symmetry 2, Symmetry 1 being the story of Dolly Saffron and her amazing encounters. But yeah, my books have been very well received. They're not national bestsellers by any means, though I will say that they have reached the #1 spot in the UFO category, which is quite niche. And, but it's really awesome to know that, wow, look at that. People are enjoying the books, because I work really hard not to put forth, a fear-based narrative. Just tell the facts, not sensationalize, not edit people's stories. That's not my job. I'm just trying to provide information, because contact is far more common than most people realize. And people are searching for answers. And again, so much fear surrounding this subject. And my first goal has always been not to, take a person's story and write about it, but to help them. Because I get a lot of calls from people who are just looking for, someone to talk to about it, someone to bounce some ideas off of, to answer a few questions, to basically counsel them through an experience that they might not fully understand. So yeah, I mean, I'm really thankful to be in a position where I can help people, because this is a subject that's very controversial. I never, again, like I said, thought in a million years this would be something I was doing, would be doing. But I'm happy. I'm very happy because it's so interesting. And I think the potential of knowledge that we can learn from ETs and from the paranormal in general is endless. I mean, it's just a really wonderful subject to explore. And I'm very thankful to even have a little part of it.
Yeah. No, your contribution is amazing to your community, our community, just mankind, because at some point, conversations like the one you and I are having right now will evoke an awakening, an awareness within somebody. And that's what I do this for, is to open someone's dial out something a little bit more of an insight as to what they're experiencing, and go, oh my goodness, this makes complete sense.
Exactly.
All it takes, my friend.
You can just wake up one person, it's worth it, because they'll wake up another, and it starts to really multiply.
Yeah. So what is it in the future for Preston? Where do you go now? You've mastered this. You in the sense of awakening all these other energetic bodies, being very present in other states of consciousness. You're gathering this material over 30 years. Where do you go from here? Do you teach people any sort of mastered states that you've helped you sort of find an awareness and grounding, or do you continue writing and documenting your books? Have you got an idea of what you want to do with your future right now?
Yeah, well, I love the subject of astral projection because it was so helpful for me, so awakening, that I do teach people how to do that. And I'm not teaching formal workshops. I just people reach out to me and I work with them directly. It's not about money or anything like that for me. It's just reward enough to know that, they did it. They get so excited. Like, I had my first one. I'm like, congratulations. That's awesome. So yeah, I do a lot of that. I put out one book on my own out-of-body experiences. I'm going to put out another because, again, I think a lot of people are just now at that state where they're starting to wake up to this and having these experiences. So I love that. I'm going to continue putting out UFO books because this is a subject that has so much, like I said, potential, and so many people are searching for answers on that. It's kind of been my mission to just let people know ETs are real and that there is life after death and that we have all these abilities, and to move beyond love. To move into love and beyond fear. So yeah, that's basically, I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing in my own little corner of the universe here and encourage people to, be as self-sufficient as possible in terms of their own food and water and their own thought processes. Don't look to other people for answers. The answers are within you. Ultimately, you can learn a lot from other people, but ultimately you have to take responsibility for your own spiritual growth. So I'm just going to continue what I'm doing because I'm having fun.
I love that, my friend. I think you're a breath of fresh air. So amazing that you contribute to the Conscious Collective. In closing, I'm going to put all abilities and ways to find you under this podcast. I would leave with one last question. What is your definition of consciousness?
Oh, that's a good one. I would say my definition of consciousness, I've never been asked this, is awareness. It's love, it's intention, it's attention, it's being present, it's empathy, it's compassion. It's all of this. It's the knowledge that you exist in this universe and you're an integral part of it and you are one with the universe and you are in fact the universe, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's amazing. Amazing, my friend. I want to thank you for sharing your time with us today and coming in. I'm very grateful for you. I'm just an amazing conversation with an incredible being. So I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your time on the podcast today.
Hey, I feel the same way about you. I can
Yeah.
see your past lives, definitely, of doing this work for a long time. I'm like, wow, look at that.
Yeah, it all just comes in. It becomes very clear. So I want to thank you, Preston, for sharing your time today on the podcast. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master San Qing. And I'll see you in the next one, guys.